Good morning. This is Axel Merk, President and Chief Investment Officer of Merk Investments. Happy Monday. Starting to have a risk-on feeling to the market here. S&P futures are up 32 right now. Well, the Dow is now positive as well. It was negative earlier. The Dow is now up 47. Bonds, they are up. 10 years up 5 ticks. The 30 is up 18 ticks. Gold is up nicely today, up at percent and 6 basis points, $18.40 at 17.62. The euro I see on the board here is up as well at 12.45, up 60 basis points. The strongest currency is the New Zealand dollar, is up a percent, 1.2%, and the yen is the weakest currency, up 4 basis points. Just back to fixed income here briefly. The 3-month T-bill rate is at 15 basis point. 3-month LIBOR at 31. The Fed funds rate, the effective one, is at 8 basis points. The VIX curve is still inverted. That's why I just hesitated here a little bit. Now that is correct. It was inverted early this morning, and it's still inverted. That means people are more fearful of the present than the future. The VIX index is at 33.83. And around the world, markets were softer. Let me get an update here. What has changed since this morning, since that's been a bit more of a risk-on feel since then. If I can get that, yes, the Euro Stoxx is down 90 basis points. The FTSE is down 40 basis points. The Nikkei was down 20. Hang Seng in Hong Kong down 50 basis points, and both China and Australia was a tad up overnight. And let me just give you, before I start ranting on here a little bit more, a few disclosure items, so please read that. I mentioned this in part because the Wirecard, the DAX listed company, fintech darling in Germany, said, well, they can't find the 2 billion. Auditors discovered it, but they didn't discover that earlier, even though the Financial Times had run stories on that for months, if not years. And so, in any case, risk on field to the market, and that has translated to a weaker dollar today. And bonds around the world, to just give you an update on those as well, before I go on some specific topics. In Europe, they're up. In Asia, they were kind of mixed. So what do we got today? We've got the beginning of a new week. We got some central banks coming out. Russia just cut rates. Mexico has an interest rate decision this week as well. But the predominant theme, I suppose, is that cases are up in the U.S. And I'm not an epidemiologist. I think that's what you call it. Anyways, but it really depends on where you look. So in my neighborhood, I live in Palo Alto. There was a huge drive to get people tested. One of my children, 19-year-old, got tested as well. Asymptomatic people. So just getting people. You don't have any symptoms, we want to see you. And so people were lining up in part for hours to get a test. And so, not surprisingly, of course, that they will find a few that are infected with the virus, and that's kind of the point. You want to come to the stage where you can do the tracing, and that's how you can keep then outbreaks from coming. And so the fact that cases are going up isn't too surprising. The death rate has continued to come down. Now, clearly, deaths obviously come with a very significant lag versus infections. And there do appear to be various flare-ups. We saw late last week, Apple, again, no investment recommendation here, but they announced that they're closing a few stores and in areas where they thought there were hotspots. And if any company has data on hotspots, it should be Apple, with access to its mobility data and other things, and knows how to interpret those. And so when the government doesn't do its job, then the private enterprise does it. I think it's people will take precautions. There was the former head of the Center of Disease Control said, well, you got to wear a mask. You gotta keep your distance, and some other WHO. I'll get back to that. The Yeah, it will get to me. Anyways, but doing the basic things, right? Wearing a mask and is helpful, it seems. And they don't think so in some parts of the country. And in most of the areas where they think so, the kind of the spread of the virus has been much less. So it doesn't matter all that much. Although some of these places, notably Texas, has seen a significant rise in places. And let's not forget in Texas, because the summer is so hot, people spend more time indoors. It's less the temperature, it's more the closeness inside the space that's get people infected. And so um, there will be some ups and downs, some backs and forth. And a backdrop of all of that, last week, a Berkeley professor published a study on the political fallout of pandemics, and it doesn't look good for the incumbent. And that's no different this time around. The approval ratings for the president have been falling. And it's really beyond me why you would have a rally in this sort of environment. The political risk for that is just too high, aside from the pandemic risk. If you can trace an outbreak back to a rally, um, I would think that's not good news for the incumbent. All right. Then we have in Germany, there were riots in Stuttgart over the weekend, and everybody is outraged. There was a rally that there was looting and whatnot. In Europe, you tend to have more professional troublemakers that come to some of these venues, but the finger is being pointed at the protesters, and that there is no racism and whatnot. I lived for the first 10 years of my life in Germany, and I can assure everybody that racism is alive and well in Germany, and it's probably not gotten better with the influx of the refugees. And obviously, there are regional differences, but it is not a problem that's just left to some poor areas. There's a huge Turkish population in Germany that came in the 1970s, and there's often tension between that community and the um, and others. And then it's not obviously the same racism that we have in the U.S., but for the first thing is the black population is obviously much smaller. But there is any election I have followed in Germany for the past 50 years, there is a racial undertone in well, some mainstream parties even, and nothing extreme, nothing radical, but certainly playing on emotions of people versus people of different backgrounds. And so every country has its issues there, and it probably would serve any country well to do some introspection. No, I'm not suggesting that everything that's been proposed by either side I agree to, but I think we should all acknowledge that there is an issue here. And now, from a practical point of view, you lock people up for 3 months, and then they have something to protest about. It's not too surprising that there's some violence that's erupting there. Any case, I shall leave it at that. Have a great week and be safe out there. Take care.